Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and I'm here with my amazing co host and sister, Rachel Smith.
Hi, everyone.
We are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through your life and with your relationship with Yahweh. And today we are talking about a super fun topic: homeschooling.
Yeah.
Yay! So, for those of you that may not know, Rachel and I were actually homeschooled when we were kids. I was homeschooled all the way until I started college at the age of 16. Rachel was homeschooled until high school, and then she went to public school for high school. So we have varying degrees of experience with homeschooling. Rachel's going to share a little bit about kind of her journey going into becoming a homeschooling mom. Not really her plan, but she did. And I was a big fan of homeschooling and then am doing that. So,
Yeah.
we're going to just talk a little bit about that today, about really our journey with homeschooling and kind of how we've started with this process so far. And kind of the goal is just to encourage you if you're thinking about getting started with homeschooling or considering it and you have kids that are, elementary school age. That's mostly what we're going to be addressing. We can certainly address the other stuff, the older kids, in a future episode if you're interested. So send us a text. You can do that now on
Yeah.
whatever podcast you're listening to. Just click that, send a text and say, hey, do an episode on this with homeschooling, or I have a question about this. We'd be happy to answer questions or talk more about homeschooling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big
So,
part of our lives.
yeah, it has been. And also, if you want to hear more about why I started or how I started college at 16, let me know if you want to hear more about that, because that's kind of the segue out of homeschooling into what's next. And maybe that could be, I'm sure that could be its own episode all in
Yeah.
and of itself and that
Yeah.
process. So we're going to jump into it. You actually discovered something very interesting. And it's that when you are not working on formal schooling, your kids actually like take a leap with their
Yeah.
learning. Tell us about that for a minute.
Yeah. So I noticed that with my oldest Everett, and he is 8 now. And when he was around 6, he would say he couldn't read yet because I hadn't done reading lessons with him yet. And I remember he would say all the time, like, I don't know how to read because my mom hasn't taught me. And so then I was like, after he said it a few times, I'm like, okay, I really need to teach him to read. He seemed very interested.
Mhm.
And so he was probably getting close to 6, or it was between 6 and 6.5, I think, somewhere around there. And I started doing reading lessons with him. And the book I use and I love it is called Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Lessons, in case anyone is interested, whether you homeschool or not. If you have a kid interested in learning to read, it's such a
It's a
good
book or it's
resource.
online or
It's a book. You can actually
okay.
get on Amazon. It's like $30 and it's
Okay.
so easy. I'm the type of homeschooler, or homeschool parent, I should say, that I have found I like the type of stuff that tells me exactly what to do.
Mhm.
So it really has the lessons modeled that everything in red is what the parent reads. And
Okay.
then you point to do a lesson every day. And we got
You cut out for a second. Go back to the parents are in red and then what you said after
Oh,
that.
the parents are in red, and then it shows like you point here for the kid, and it just breaks down everything to do. And it just makes it very simple and straightforward, and lessons are not that long. And actually, Everett might have been closer to 7 now that I think about it, because the reason I realized he might have been closer to 7 is because we got about halfway through this book. We were a little over 50 lessons because it's 100 lessons. And then I got pregnant with Haven.
Mhm.
And once I got pregnant, I was so sick, and he was in first grade.
Mhm.
And I could barely do anything. I couldn't even get out of bed the first few months. I was so sick. And so we essentially took a pause on all school. Like I felt like that homeschool year was just, it felt like a flop because I was newly pregnant. I literally found out I was pregnant September 1st. So it was like we were in the school year
Mm,
2 months or
mhm.
2 weeks, but I had been doing these reading lessons with him over the summer. So I guess it was between kindergarten and first grade when I had started this with him. So anyway, all that to say, once I got really sick, the school year was a wash at almost at that point because then we moved and it was just a lot going on. And I felt so guilty about it. Like I kept feeling guilty, like he's gonna get so behind. And first grade, I will also say this, kindergarten and first grade, I think people put too much pressure on themselves as a parent, as a homeschool parent, and on the kids. If if they're done with first grade and they have, a grasp on reading and can write and know their numbers and maybe do a little addition, I think that's a good place to be. But they don't need to be like a scholar and have like all these different, and that, I mean, this is just my opinion.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, all that to say, I was feeling really guilty at that point because this is my first experience and he's my oldest. And then I noticed one day he was just like reading all his kids' books himself. And
Mhm.
then I noticed he can like read every sign in the store and he's just constantly reading all the time. And we hadn't done any lessons in like 2 or 3 months.
Mhm.
And then I kind of like sat back and I watched him and I had us read some stuff together and I realized like he can read everything. And it
He
really
learned how
changed.
to read. It only took 50
Yes,
lessons.
exactly. So you can teach your child to read in 50 lessons, but I,
There
I
you
think
go.
it, I think everyone, it could be different for each child. But in my experience, what I saw is I gave him the initial introduction and the basics. That's also what I really like about that
Mhm.
curriculum
Mhm.
is it doesn't teach sight words, it teaches sounds. And as the kids can learn each one of those, it's like then they start figuring out how to sound any word out once they learn
Mhm.
those.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really cool. And I didn't really it definitely changed my perspective as a homeschool mom on giving kids space, letting them have breaks. And so now, uh, 2 years later, almost, he's going to be in third grade this fall, and I have my second is 6, and I decided in his kindergarten year to start the reading lessons with him so much earlier than Everett
Mhm.
because I kind of felt like I was late on it and I had felt guilty about it. So I'm like, I'm going to start it early with Maverick. And Maverick pushed back so much more. Like it would be hard for me to do reading lessons with him sometimes because he'd be like, no, I don't want to do it. And this is another thing that I think is really helpful for this is my homeschooling philosophy. And again, everybody can have a different philosophy, but sometimes I think it's nice to hear this from someone else. And I talking to other homeschool moms have heard it that we don't have to push and pressure our kids every day if they're pushing back on something
Mhm.
because I don't want my kids to hate learning. I don't want them to
Yeah.
hate reading. I don't want them to hate
Mhm.
writing.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, Everett was a little bit more of my guinea pig that I would kind of pressure him to do stuff more, even when he didn't want to do it. So then with my second, when he came around and I realized, oh, they're going to learn it anyway.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
instead of having a fight about it, we can be like, hey, if you're going to push, if you're having a hard time with this right now, then we'll take a break and we'll do it later. And if later he's still just like not being cooperative with it, instead of punishing him for that, be like, we will do it tomorrow.
Mhm.
I don't take school as a way to punish my kids.
Yeah.
And so I struggle. And I also gave Maverick a lot of grace because I realized I was starting him younger and he had
Mhm.
less of an interest and a desire to learn to read. And it was
Mhm.
really me kind of trying to prompt introducing it to him. And he was essentially saying, like, I'm not ready for this.
Mhm.
But the reason I kept trying to do it is he got everything. So all of that came to the springtime and he was really pushing back a lot more. And we were almost at lesson 50. And
That lesson
I,
50.
yeah, that lesson 50. We didn't even get to lesson 50 with him. And then he was getting so upset more often than not. And we were skipping more days than we were doing that I was like, you know what, we're just going to take a break. And so we didn't do it for the last month or so of the school year. And then summer started and he's constantly saying, I don't know how to read. I can't do that. I don't know how to read. And he says it all the time. And so much so about a month and a half or so ago, it was at the beginning of summer. Everett took it upon himself that he's like, I'm going to teach him to read. And he, in their room, was doing a reading lesson. I just heard him yelling at him, You're never like, I don't sound like that. It doesn't sound like me. But,
What did he
you
say?
never
You're
know.
never getting this?
Yeah, you're never gonna get this. And then Maverick was like, You can't know. And anyway, it was Everett just came out and he's like, he's not listening to me. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, bud. It was hard for me to,
Welcome to the
but
club.
nice try. And so that was kind of the last of anyone trying to formally teach Maverick. And then in the past several weeks, they have these kind of comic style books that are really popular with kids. And Everett is always reading them. He reads them over and over again. And sometimes he reads them to Maverick. And I noticed Maverick, he sits there and I just figured he was looking at the pictures and he's like, Mom, look at this. And he just starts reading every single word on every page. And I'm like, You're reading all that. He's like, No, I don't know how to read. I just know all these words. And I'm like, That's reading, buddy. Like, he's like, Well,
That is what
I
it
just
is.
remember it. I'm like, reading is literally memorizing. Like, that's what it is. And so it's so funny because with both of them, I guess this was my very long-winded way, which hopefully had some encouragement in it, that when we take a break and I take the pressure off, they just explode in their
Mhm,
learning. And
mhm.
it's I said with Everett, I feel like he taught himself to read. I just gave him the tools to do it. And
Yeah.
kind of the same with Maverick. He taught
Mhm.
himself to read. He didn't like having pressure of someone making him do a lesson.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just a really cool thing about homeschooling and I do think it's important to take breaks. And I
Yeah.
actually before this summer was thinking about doing year-round school. A lot of homeschoolers do that where you don't take off.
Year around school.
Yeah, yeah. Where you
I
don't
thought you
take off
said you're into school, and I was like, I have never heard of that before.
year round. Year round
Year round
school.
school. Okay.
So you don't take off in the summer, you
Isn't
do
that what
school.
you did?
Yes, I did because I never got any of my work done. Yes. But the concept is to take longer breaks throughout the year, especially in
Mhm,
months that the weather is nice when you can be outside more.
mhm.
So like take all of December off or, take all of just you take
Yeah.
long breaks throughout the year and then do it over the summer. So I was thinking about that before this school year, but then I just really realized like we all need a break. And
We all
because
need a break.
I'm
We're taking a break.
we need a break. We need this summer break.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
that's awesome. And those are some good tips. And I don't even think that I've had a chance to even talk to you about this. We actually have been doing Hooked on Phonics with Brooke because okay, so she's 4.5. When she was 3, we were doing the Duo ABC app, which kind of teaches you letters and stuff like that. And I had gotten some preschool and one kindergarten workbook from Five Below, of all places. And she completed all of those books, all of them. There was like 5 or 6 of them. She loves to do, quote, school. She's always like, Mom, can we do school? And what I've
Oh.
learned about her is that she prefers to be hands on with me and have like one-to-one time where I'm doing things with her versus go on an app and like
Mm-hmm.
go through it, even though they're gamified and all that. She doesn't care about that. She gets very tired by it quickly. So, anyway, she finishes all these books, and I'm like, I don't know what to do next. And I kept getting all these ads for Hooked on Phonics. And she kept saying things to me similar to your boys, like, well, I can't read that yet. I don't know how to read yet. Funny enough, she actually has memorized some books and she doesn't know how to read, but she knows what some books say. And she
Yeah.
won't even look at the pages and she'll just repeat what she knows is on that page. So that's why I know she's not reading.
Yeah.
But I kept getting these ads for Hooked on Phonics. And so I'm like, all right, well, maybe we'll do this to kind of just, supplement for now. And the way that it works is you can use their app and then they also send you a book, like a workbook, and they send you two readers. I think it's like every month or something like that. And so the first month went better than the second month. I'll just say that. The first month, she would do the app, but then she would get tired of doing it. The workbook she loved doing, and she would do with me, and we got through that book fast. Then the second month comes. I lost the workbook, and she refuses to do the app because she doesn't like it. She doesn't enjoy that's not how she likes to learn.
Yeah.
And so I've gone back and I'm going back to finding books that she can practice writing her letters and stuff like that because she still needs some work on the actual letter. She can spell her name. She can spell the first word she ever learned how to spell was Blippy because Blippy's a genius. And in his episodes say, "Kids, how do you spell my name? Blippi." So she can spell Blippy and Mika and Brooke. And mom, dad, there's a couple of things that she can already spell, but just working on her letter. So I figured we'd do that for now. I'm glad you told me about that book because now maybe I'll get that instead.
Yeah.
And she asked me, I want to do school. Mom, can we do school? But she doesn't like apps. And I don't blame her. And I don't want her on screens anyway. So it's fine by me.
Yeah, and you also find with curriculums, or at least in my experience, is you start one out, whether it's an app or sometimes even workbooks that we do, that we start out really strong and like everybody's excited about it. And then like a month in,
Yeah, they're over
we're
it.
all over it. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's and me just as much as them. I've done that a lot with, I guess she has another year till kindergarten, but you can
she does.
really start anything
Yeah.
whenever you want as you feel she's ready. But a really popular kindergarten curriculum is called kindergarten math with confidence. It's really popular
Okay.
and it's highly recommended. And I got that one. Actually, I think I still have it and you can have it if you want to try it because I hated it. But you might like it because actually it might be great to start with her now, even before kindergarten. The reason I hated it is it felt way too easy.
Mm.
Like I remember Everett at kindergarten level was like, why am I doing this? Because it would be like, which of these lines is longer? And and it was very hands-on lessons. And so
Hmm.
it kind of felt like both him and I were like, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time because he knows all of it. And
Sure.
so it gets frustrating. And I didn't even feel like it was because he was like so advanced. It just to
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
felt like more preschool. So
That's funny.
but other people love it and maybe it's because it's like these building blocks of harder concepts.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's the whole thing with homeschooling though, is curriculum hopping. Finding
Totally.
works
Totally.
for your
And,
kid.
I do want to throw out there that I am not advocating for pushing kids too young to do things
Yeah.
at a young age. The only reason why I have done any of this is because she's asked me and
Yeah.
because she's shown interest in this and because I know she can, because she
Yeah.
literally sits down and writes and colors all day long.
Yeah.
And she's trying to write words and she writes people letters and she writes what she knows. And it's not always letters that make up actual words. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to encourage and help her along in that process because I know that's what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
Um, but like you, it's very much like if she doesn't want to do it. I'm not going to be like, you have to do this today.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to do
Yeah.
it? Okay. I don't blame you if the app seems harder. And there are times where I'll sit with her and it's what I'm realizing is the challenge for her is it's the same thing like they're teaching word sounds. And I think sometimes she just has a hard time associating that with the words that that she's being given because it's all new.
Mhm.
And so when she does a couple in a row, she gets them right. If she gets one wrong, she's like totally turned off by it and then she doesn't
Mm.
really want to do it anymore. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see how that demotivates and
Yes.
just to learn her personality because that's part of our jobs as homeschool moms is to learn each of our kids' individual learning styles and really learn how to work with that versus force them into something.
Yeah.
Our listeners may not know this, but I used to teach college writing. And my when I was in my master's program, I started off in English education before I just changed to English. And so I started out learning about learning styles and the importance of understanding how people learn. And that some people are visual learners, some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, which means they like to be more hands on. There's all different types of learners. And it's funny because, I can see already my son is 2 years old and I know he's totally different than Brooke, right?
Yeah.
And even Brayden, she's only one, but I can tell that they're all very different, just like your kids are different. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
You and I were very different learners.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember you hated math and I
yep,
hated English. And I
we were
remember
flip
when,
flopped.
yeah, when I was, it was when we lived in New York. So I must have been 5 or 6. You hated doing your math problems and you would have me do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
For
also,
you.
that would help me get done faster so we could play Barbie.
Yes, yeah. You would have me do them, and I was like a 6-year-old, probably barely had any schoolwork yet because I was
Yeah, I
probably like
don't even know
kindergarten.
if you were even you would have been already at least in kindergarten, but you
Yeah,
probably barely had any work to do. And I just remember
yeah,
being like, hey, do you want to do this? And you were like, yeah, I'll do that.
yeah, because I loved math. Yeah, and it's funny because Everett, my oldest, is so much like me, and I thought he was gonna love math like I did too, but he hates it. And just I bring up you and I as kids because this past year, Maverick being kindergarten and Everett being second grade, I had them doing a computer curriculum, and there were so many times where Everett was sitting at the computer frustrated doing his math problems and Maverick would be shouting out the answer across the table. I'd be like,
And you're like,
Maverick,
oh, I
stop it,
remember
he's
that.
gonna get it. But it just,
Listen,
yeah, it
he
was funny to
just tell
me.
him it'll all work out in the end. It'll all work
Yeah,
out.
yes.
I didn't prioritize math and it still somehow managed to work out in life. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's homeschooling with us having the background, we can understand a lot of it in some ways. And it also to me it's funny that I'm doing it because I never particularly enjoyed homeschooling or maybe appreciated it is the better word as a kid. And I get it now. Like you loved it and you loved learning and getting all your work done months in advance. Like that's
yeah,
how you always
I did.
worked. But I don't know if you remember this or maybe it was just me. Looking at kids who go to school like almost like the Little Mermaid, like I want to be a part of your world. Like it seemed like so just because we didn't know what they did, like riding on a school bus or like being with other kids all day, like it just seemed so intriguing. And I remember wishing and wanting to do that.
That's funny. I did not feel that way. I felt the opposite. I was like, I don't want to have to get up early and go
Yeah,
anywhere because have never been an early bird from the time I was a young child until
that's
now.
true.
I don't like to get up early. And the
Yeah.
thought of getting up early and being around strangers, believe it or not, I was pretty introverted as a child.
Yeah, yeah, I
Growing up,
remember.
I wasn't super outgoing. I got embarrassed very easily. I wasn't just outgoing in the way that I felt like I needed to be if I went to school. So going to school to me seemed like a punishment. It
Yeah.
didn't seem like something that I wanted to do at all.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I just had a different perspective. I liked being homeschooled. I liked doing my work as fast as I could so that I could go do other things. I was always into crafts and different activities. So, I cross stitch. I loved reading. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to get my schoolwork done so I could go stick my nose in a book and just read as much as I could. Different ages, I had different interests, but I'm thinking about when we lived in Florida, which is where we lived as kids for the longest period of time. And it was like, I just wanted to read or do some whatever craft I was into at that time, whether it was cross stitching or sewing or something.
Yeah.
But that was the cool thing about being homeschooled is that I felt like you could do whatever you want once you're done with your
Yeah.
work.
You really own your own time. And that it's one of the reasons I ended up changing my mind and wanting to homeschool is just wanting my kids to have their childhood to own their time
Yeah.
essentially. And also, but it is funny because I hear my kids now saying sometimes we have an elementary school like right across the street from us and they're like, I want to go there. And then and I think about how I felt at that age and so I get it. But I
Mhm.
just say things like, do you realize that you would have to wake up at like 6 in the morning and be out the door and we'd have to be over there by whatever time. So the same thing you said. And I'm like, and also you get 20 minutes to eat lunch because my kids have never taken less than an hour and a half to eat a meal in their entire life. Like they would never make it in school. They wouldn't get to eat.
Yeah.
And
I I think the allure is there for a lot of kids that are homeschooled. Like I know for Brooke, she's only 4. She can go to school if she wanted to, but people say that to me in front of her all the time. They're like,
mm,
"Oh," or to her, "Oh, are you excited to go to school?"
yeah.
And I'm like, "Guys, have you met me before? Have we met ever? Because you should know that I'm all about homeschooling." And it's
Yeah.
just interesting because then it gets in her head. And then, of course, she's hearing all these kids, a lot of her little friends are 5. And so they're going to school for the first time, or even kids that aren't in kindergarten, if they're going to pre K, they say they're going to school. So she hears that a lot that kids are going to school.
Yeah.
And so she'll say to me sometimes, "Mommy, am I going to go to school? Or when am I going to go to school?" And I'm like, "Well, you actually already started school, girl, and it's at home, homeschool." And I
This
don't
is
know.
it.
This
Your
is it.
life
Yeah,
is
this is it.
it.
This is it. This is where you are. But what's interesting is she always tells me that her favorite place to be is with me and that she
Aw.
doesn't want to be away. And so sometimes I'll say, she's like, "Am I going to go to school?" I'll be like, "Well, you would have to go there for the whole day and I would not be there." And she's like, "Oh, well then I want to stay here with you." And so that's kind of sweet, but she'll probably be over that by the time she's 5.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I offsetted or offset that desire in this past year by so for kindergarten and second grade, having the boys go to a co-op. So it's
True.
like
That's true.
school. It's
Yeah,
except it's at a church. It's really small classrooms and they learn extracurriculars. And to me, I really like it too because it's things that I'm really I would have a hard time teaching, like
sure.
Spanish and
Mhm.
music and art. And
So
so
has
stuff
that helped? Did that stop the "I
yeah,
wanna go"
it
to
definitely did. So much so that Maverick doesn't even wanna go there. All he wants to do is stay
stay
home. He doesn't
home?
want that. Like
Yeah.
he and it's funny because he does really well there and he has friends and he has fun, but then he's like, "I don't wanna do this." And but I do, we were always involved in homeschool group stuff like that when we were
Mhm,
kids and having
mhm.
classes. And so I do find value in that. And
Sure.
that's the thing as a
Yeah,
homeschool families is you utilizes the resources that you have or that you can afford. And I think that there is an important of not just the socialization, but also making friends. Everett loves it way more than Maverick, and he has all these friends there.
Hmm.
So it is really great. And then it's only once a week for half the day. So it's
Hmm.
not
A
it's
huge
them going
commitment.
to school.
Sure, sure, yeah,
So maybe one day Brooke could do something like that and
yeah.
quote unquote go to school.
Well, last summer she went to VBS and then she also went to camp. She went to
Yes.
gymnastics camp. And after the third week, she was like, nah, I am not going back there.
Yeah.
You are not leaving me here. We're not doing this. And so this summer, she did VBS. She did not want to go to either because she did not want me to leave her. And I had to stay for a little while. And she ended up doing fine. But then after the week, she was like, I'm done. I don't want to do any more things. And so it is interesting that she has the interest, but I know that she's just not quite ready. And, I always think about back in the day, and I'm not talking about like when we were kids back in the day. I'm talking about pioneer times when school was invented, the Laura Ingalls Wilder
Mhm.
times.
Yeah.
Shout out Little House on the Prairie.
Mm.
And how school has kind of adapted and started, because prior to the one room schoolhouses, and we're talking late 1700s, early 1800s, that formal school really came to be, kids didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Kids started work. They worked from
Yeah.
some children 5, 6 years old working on the farm, helping the family collect eggs or milk cows or whatever it might be. And then some kids even going out with their dads, like boys would go with their fathers at 9, 10 years old to go do activities that were work related. And when you and I are such homeschool nerds that we've been to a lot of one room schoolhouses
Yeah.
to learn this
We
history.
have.
We've been to the first schoolhouse in the state of Florida and a
Yeah.
couple of others.
And we were probably dressed up in dresses like they would have worn at those times as we
We
were there.
probably were. And it's just interesting because to think about how things were then, and you were not sending 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. You weren't sending little kids like that to these one room schoolhouses. Those little children were still home with mom. You were sending maybe 7-year-olds until they were working age. So probably 10 or 11.
Mhm.
And they were going to these classrooms and starting to learn some basic skills and things like that, reading and math. And over time, now what is school? Like you're starting when you're born and you're there until you're 25 or 30 if you're going to get your PhD or whatever. You're spending the first your 30 years of your life in school in classrooms and things like that. So it's very interesting how things have changed.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things with those that are considering homeschooling, those that want to homeschool but weren't homeschooled and don't have a background in homeschooling, is they don't know how to structure the day. And they're like, what
Mhm.
does that look like?
Yeah.
What do you do all day? And that's my favorite question to answer because I'm like, first thing you need to deconstruct what you think about school.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because the purpose of public school is to have a place for your children to be while you're at work. And they keep
Mhm.
your kids busy the whole time. And yeah, of course they're learning things. It's not to say that they're not going to learn stuff while they're there. It's not just childcare. It's not what the purpose of school is. But when you're homeschooling, you're not sitting children down doing formal lessons from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. That's
Right.
just not how it is. And if that is how you're teaching, then you must be tired.
My kids would riot. They wouldn't allow for that. I
Exactly. And it's much shorter periods of time doing educational things, teaching
Mhm.
lessons on, say, writing, reading, math as they get older, history and other subjects, Bible. But then there's a lot of other stuff mixed in. Like for us, when we were kids, cooking. You wouldn't
Yeah.
think that that was something that, but that's a very valuable skill these days. A lot of people don't know how to cook. And we learned how to cook as small children, and we would make ourselves lunch every single day.
Yeah.
And not that we were like making gourmet, Michelin meals or anything like that,
Yeah.
but we knew how to use the stove. We knew how to use the toaster oven, the microwave. We knew how to boil water and read the steps to making a recipe and things like
Mhm.
that. And that's an important skill for kids to learn that teaches you about math. And it
Mhm.
also teaches you about science because you're learning about reactions and things like that. When you're doing crafts or you're building things with clay or you're drawing something or you're building something out of sticks, I think about this kit that Brooke got that's just, listen, I put this on her list. So I want to be clear that I asked for this craft kit and it's like 500 million pieces of crafts to make crafts with, right? And one day I thought take this thing out and I'm like, she loves doing crafts. I'm like, all right, we're going to do crafts. And I open the box and they're like, this is the best craft kit ever because it's just stuff and you get to make up what you make. And I'm like, no, how am I going to think up ideas? Like I need
Yeah.
instructions. I need something. And then Brooke is like, can we make a picture frame? I was like,
She
all
just
right,
immediately
she's
thinks of something.
she's got the ideas. And
Yeah.
so then there's popsicle sticks in there. We glued those together. She decorated them with some stuff and glitter. And then the second thing, can we make mermaids? And I was like, okay, we'll figure it out. So it's funny because she has like the creative idea, and then I'm like the adult trying to figure out how we're going to do this with this craft kit. But think about how that is teaching her, and it's teaching me too at the same time, and it's the same type of thing that she would be doing if she was in preschool, right? She'd be doing crafts, but
Mhm.
we're doing them
Yeah.
harder because we have to figure it out for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that has its place in development too, because children's hands, their bones are soft and not even fully fused for them to be able to write super neatly until
Mhm.
they're developed more. And the more that they handle, fine motor things of gluing and sticking little decorations or playing with clay, like that's strengthening their hands. Like all
Yeah.
of it is
Yeah.
education. So yeah, it
Yeah.
just it just looks differently for us at home. But we kind of get it done in less time and then they bounce off the walls the rest of the day. My kids anyway.
Yeah, her favorite thing to do right now is use scissors. That craft kit came with
Oh,
kid
that's a
scissors.
huge developmental
She
thing.
she wants to cut out everything. So she likes to draw things and then cut them out. And it'll be like, I made a pocket. And then she likes to use tape too. So she's like, I'm
Oh,
gonna tape this pocket on you. Like, okay.
I I can't even keep tape in my house anymore. Like, you know how you always have tape around for wrapping a
Hmm.
present or something? I have no tape because my kids are always finding every roll of tape that they can to tape things together in some kind of craft or something. I even so much as like, this is my tape. I bought you a pack and only this one is mine. And then they run through all theirs, have none left, and then they're going for mine. And then I never have tape. I can't even wrap presents anymore.
That's
Also, the
hilarious.
thing with the scissors too, Brooke probably won't do this, but maybe Ben, when he's her age, is Maverick was mine that at that age, around 4, when he discovered a love for scissors, went around the house cutting holes in every single blanket that we own. Like every one
Oh
day I'm like,
no.
why do all of our blankets have holes in them? Like, how does everything develop holes at the same time? Almost like, they're all wearing out. And those were all those like shabby chic expensive blankets that
Oh
you and I love.
no.
And I was so mad. And then I realized he was doing it with scissors.
Oh my gosh. That's
And he's
so
also
funny.
the one that cut his hair down to
That's
the
right.
scalp right in the front. That was
I
last
hate to
year.
say this, but I did recently find a hole in a blanket.
It's starting.
I better watch this. I actually had to
Definitely.
hide the regular scissors because Ben does know where he knew where those were. They were in this drawer. and he would see her with them. So then I was like, no, no, no. So I had to put them up where neither of them could get to them. But I'm gonna have to watch these blankets. That's
Oh, yeah.
nerve wracking.
It is. I still use them with the holes because what we still have some with holes in them. I just got over it. So,
That's funny. All right. So, any final tips or thoughts on homeschooling that you want to share?
so I think for me, I mentioned before how homeschooling was not necessarily my plan, that I didn't appreciate it enough growing up and my experience with it. And I might have said before that the reason I decided to homeschool is the pandemic started when my oldest Everett was going into kindergarten. And I just couldn't imagine sending him away from me and having to wear a mask and be at a little desk with all this gl- plastic around him. Like, I just couldn't imagine doing that. So I really kind of felt like in that moment, I was being forced into it. But I remember a good friend of mine, actually, I am friends with her from since high school, and she has uh been home she was homeschooling at that time, and we were just kind of chatting in DMs, and she was so encouraging to me that you are the best teacher that they could have, and that God gave these kids to you. And I remember feeling so encouraged by what she said, that now I'm the mom saying that to other moms who are thinking about homeschooling, but in that same place of like afraid to do it. Like, I can't do it. I remember for me, I thought I could never teach a kid to read. Well, here I am. I've taught two kids to read because you know what? The kids teach themselves to read. But
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
that's the message. But I just want to offer some encouragement of whatever place you're at, whether you homeschool or not. Like, I'm not necessarily trying to sell homeschooling. And even some people in homeschooling, we have struggles. It is not easy. And one thing I hear people say a lot is, I could never do that. I don't have the patience. Let me tell you, I do not have the patience either. And I never have. But the
And I
beautiful
never will.
I never will. The beautiful thing about homeschooling is that we grow with our children. Like, I have grown more patience. It has been good for me. I definitely have my moments where I'm getting super frustrated on working on something with them. And like I was saying before, those are the times, whether it's my one of my kids struggling or me struggling, that I step back and I'm like, hey, we homeschool. We don't need to get frustrated over something like this. We can come back to it. So I really think that anyone who has a desire to do this can, and it's a great time in our culture to homeschool too. There's just so many resources out there that
Mhm.
have never been available before. So
Yeah, yeah.
I hope that this could be, we might have been all over the place a little bit, and also just kind of chit chatting about our own experiences with it, and
Mhm.
just an introduction, really. But I hope it could be encouraging that we can all, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's really the
Yeah.
moral of the story.
Sure. And I'll point some folks to some resources because I know it can be tough. Go on Facebook and look up
Oh, yeah.
local homeschool groups in your area. That's a great place to find local homeschool groups. You can search for Christian homeschool groups in your area. Ask around at your church or at the local churches that are around you to see if they have co-ops and programs. It has honestly never been easier. You could just Google homeschool groups in my area, co-op homeschool groups in my area, and come across stuff. There are a million Instagram accounts that are dedicated to Christian homeschooling too. So definitely just search the web because there's a lot of people that you can connect to. Funny enough, our mom was actually on a homeschooling forum when we were I
Yeah.
mean, this is like the internet was not what it is
It was just
today.
a black screen with green letters. That's what the internet was
Sure.
back then, remember?
I'm pretty sure it was homeschoolmoms.com or something like that.
Yeah.
And she made some great friends and had other people to talk to about her experience, which I know really helped her through that time. So definitely get connected to some folks in the homeschool communities around you or even virtually, because that can help a lot as you're going through your journey to just not feel like you're so alone in it. But yeah, anybody can homeschool anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we are so grateful that you listened to this episode. Like Rachel said, hopefully you took a nugget out of this. We were a little bit informal today, but hopefully there's something here for you to take home and homeschool on or not.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to follow along outside the podcast, you can do so on social media, as always, on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook at The Radiant Mission. And today we're going to close with Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. We're wishing you a radiant week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.